Welcome, everyone. I think we can start. Maybe some people come later. We see. Welcome to the Triangle of Success. This talk is about involving the right parties in the form design process. I say hello from Germany. My name is Paul. I'm a designer. And I actually developed this talk together with my colleague Julian, who is an engineer. We held this talk together at another conference before. So this is kind of a combined knowledge. He has mostly worked in a tax project. I am working in a justice project. So this is where the information is sourced from. And just about this talk. The talk is actually not that long. It's about half an hour. So I really hope that we have a nice conversation afterwards. I'm really interested to get to know all your experiences and questions. And you can do so in Yelling, but I think that will be a challenge for me with one screen and so on. So we can just also talk. So I work at the Digital Service. You might have who of you has been in the talk of Marlene and Sonja just before about the access to this? Okay, only a couple of hands. Okay, so I think you have some context, so it's going to be even more exciting, but everyone else will also be able to follow because those two are actually working in the same project than I am. But I am solely going to talk about forms today, or specifically about the form design process, because we at Digital Service noticed a pattern in several projects when designing forms. And this is actually why I'm talking here today, and that is that improving the usability of a form is not enough. I know now that there are different definitions of usability, but from the talk from the panel this morning. But let us dive into it. And what I mean with it is that improving the usability of a form is not enough to truly simplify a form. So this talk is about how we make forms simpler, and how this actually also makes us faster. But first, some context about what is actually digital service. A little step back. As in many countries, digitalization is a complicated affair in Germany. Our government is very decentralized. We have the federal government, but we have also the 16 federal states. And they are actually responsible for many, many things, among those justice and taxes. So that makes, first of all, digitalization a challenge. And we are also somehow part of the federal government, but we are not part of a ministry. So we don't have we're not working inside the ministries. We don't have a policy mandate. We usually work on existing services. The Digital Service was founded only in 2020 by the federal government, so we are constantly growing. We are now 180, 200 people, I think. It's not everyone on this image. So we are still pretty young. And our USP is really to bring user-centered design into government. So we always work in interdisciplinary teams with product, engineering, design, and research, and then work with specific contracted projects in the ministry. And that is also important. We mostly work on citizen-facing services. We usually don't do the heavy back-end lifting. And we are currently working across 10 projects in 5 different service areas. So that's a bit of context, because I think this is a little bit different in each country. So I think this maybe helps for later understanding. Now back to forms. Because when we talk about forms, we often talk about usability, accessibility, and consistency, and this is very important. And it's not possible to build good forms without those. But it's not the end of the story, because everyone says talk to the citizens who use the form, then you know what the problem with the form is. And we do that a lot. So we learn which parts of forms are actually hard to understand. Therefore, we can improve usability and, to a certain extent, accessibility of the form. But as said earlier, improving the usability is not enough to really simplify a form. Put it in other words, asking unnecessary questions in an understandable way is still asking unnecessary questions. So, but how do we get to asking only necessary questions? That's a bit the question. And here I want to show the first example, which is legal aid, the project I'm working on now for 2.5 years. So also there, some context. The justice system is organized on state level, but there are some legally binding forms, and those forms are on paper. They are by no means digital right now. And we at DigitalService are tasked to digitalize many of those forms. And the legal aid application is the first use case in our project, so to say. There are actually two legal aid applications, but we don't want to make it too complicated. This is the form. You can see beautiful, beautiful form. And you see those blue marked areas because the form asks for many, many details like the income, partner of the income of the kids, etc. And the problem is roughly 50% of the applicants receive social benefits. And in some courts, it's even more. There are no exact numbers on this because it's a federal affair. But the income is so low that they are almost, and those people are almost always eligible for legal aid. That's where they actually get the social benefits in the first place. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. And this leads to the practice of the legal clerks in the courts to not even checking all those details when people hand in their applications and receive social benefits. So that means for roughly 50% of applicants filling out those fields, it's actually not necessary. And this is a prime example of asking unnecessary questions, and this wouldn't get any better if we asked them in an understandable way. But the question is now, how do we know which questions actually are unnecessary? And in this case, this was easy because we visited lots of courts and talking to legal clerks. And this is very interesting because the legal aid application is possible to also apply for it verbally. So you don't have to fill out the form. You just go to court to specific opening times, depending on the court. And then you say, I want to have the legal aid. And then we could just shadow in those conversations what the people were actually asked. So we kind of got a better sense for what is really necessary. What do the legal clerks really want to know from the people instead of what the paper form actually requires. And so the question is then why are we asking the unnecessary questions in the first place? And that is laws and regulations, of course. But because I just said roughly 50%, but in theory, in some extreme edge cases, citizens may have more income than the legal aid limit permits, although they get the social benefits. So this is kind of the situation. We have looked at the citizen side, we have looked at the legal clerk side, and now I want to make a step forward and introduce you to the triangle. This is why you're all here, I guess, the catchy title. Because right now we have looked at three things. That's the usability, the necessity, and the legal basis. And this can also be translated into people. And then it looks like this form you have for the usability connected to the form users, and for the necessity, the form processes, and the form owners are, of course, owning the legal basis. And this is a triangle, but depending on the context, there may be many more stakeholders in each of those corners. So for the form users, it's mostly citizens, but it also, for example, in the case of legal aid, sometimes friends and family helping out, filling out the form. Especially for kids and elderly people, it's often friends and family. This can also be companies. And for the form processes, it can be one civil servant, but it can also be, if it's a more complicated application, can also be several. And for the form owners, there are often many. So in Germany, we often have the ministries, then the subordinate authorities, and then a different agency that's actually implementing a form. In the legal aid case, it's relatively easy. We only have the Ministry of Justice. Yes, we have the states, but then we have only one legal clerk working on the case, and mostly the citizens, sometimes friends and family. But in the case of the income tax, this is much more complicated, as there's the Ministry of Finance, the Bavarian Tax Ministry, there's the Federal State Conference, and another IT agency. So yeah, there we have lots of stakeholders. So this is what we call the triangle of success. If you connect those dots. And in other words, this is policy, operations, and users. And I think this is, in a way straightforward. But the question is, how does the triangle actually help us? And I think the triangle helps us to understand, first of all, the requirements of all those different parties. Now, we want to look how do we, what do we actually learn from each party, from each corner? Because the form owners initially, when they come up with legislation and therefore a form, because we have those many times legally binding forms, the form owners are decided which inputs are desired. But I mean, this can not also be ministries. The form owners can also be local authorities or whatever. But they are deciding which input or imagining which inputs are desired. So from them, we basically learn why certain form fields exist in the first place. But then the form processes work with the inputs. And from them, we learn which form fields are necessary or which are actually missing. And the form users at the end, of course, make the inputs. And from them, we can learn which inputs are hard to understand or also easy to understand. And we as form designers are kind of in a unique position to connect the dots and kind of sit in the middle and really connect the requirements, sync them. And the next step is then to evaluate actually the impact of the different parties. So for the form users, we can improve the usability. For the form processes, we can only change processes, and for the form owners, we would need to change the regulation. And then the question is, where do we actually start? And this is, of course, not a free playing field, because the corner with the biggest impact might not always be the first to start. And the biggest impact often is, of course, regulation. But if you start working on a project, changing the regulation in week one is often not feasible. So, but then also sometimes the change in procedures doesn't help. But then it's maybe helpful to actually start with the usability and start with the form users. But in many cases, the usability improvements are simply not enough. And if then the change in procedures also does not help or is not feasible, then we need to go back or on top, however you want to call it, to the form owners and start there. And this is kind of no matter where you start, you need to include all the parties to get the requirements from all sides. So that's where this is a triangle, because it's really because all the different parts are connected. I want to go back to the example of legal aid, because, no surprise, we knew pretty early on in the project that the biggest impact would be to change the regulation defining the paper form. But we didn't have the data to back that up, really. we also didn't have the mandate, and it wasn't our task in the first place, because our task was to digitize those. And at the same time, there were lots of usability improvements to be made. So we started actually with the form users, improving the usability. So this looked like this. You remember the paper form, this is a part of it. And we made a simple understanding question out of it. Do you have children who are under 24? It's even not a very simple question, but that has other reasons. This is live for a year now. And we would still print this data in the PDF. It's still Germany 2025. But we quickly realized that we can ask better questions if we actually know the right answers. And this is where we are coming back to the form processes. And this is how the whole this whole thing came into being, because you remember I was talking about talking to the legal clerks in the courts, and actually learning, or like shadowing, supervising from them, shadowing, learning from them what kind of information they actually need, and what they can work with. And in this process, we learned that 90%, up to 90% of those paper forms actually are sent back because they are not complete. So we had a proper problem at hand. There were some free text fields which had very little guidance, and people were just not able to fulfill the tasks. And so we learned that that the receivers of social benefits don't need to declare their financial details. And in the digital form now, it looks like this. Like, this is the marked section is for the financial details, and you can see on the screen on the right how short it is. When you get social benefits, the form just becomes shorter, which is easy in the digital, but not so easy in paper. So we basically cut in the menu it looks short, but basically in the paper form we cut it by 50%. So we essentially transformed the legal clerk's practice into code, if you will. And now we had the necessary evidence to approach the form owners to change the regulation. And we wanted them to remove the income fields for receivers of social benefits and improve the usability of the paper form, because we would know the paper form would still exist. We also wanted to change something about the necessary the belongings that needed to be put in the form, but that actually didn't work out. So the form owners agreed on changing the paper form, and we are now improving the usability of the form. And remember, the form is really, so to say, the legal basis of this law. So so we moved some sections to attachments to make the form shorter for many people, and it actually turns out to be longer but more understandable. And we tested it in one court and did another test round a couple of weeks ago, and it worked nicely. So this is shots from our usability testing, and so this is where it comes full circle. And they just sent us, I think last week or so, proposal to change the law for the legal aid. And this has been now a process of 2.5 years, roughly, just to give you an idea. And now I want to show you another example for the income taxes, which Julian has been working on. And German income taxes, there also needs to be some context. There's a tool that exists for a long time, since I think the 90s. So the usability could be better, and we were asked to make it easier, because we as DigitalService had worked on some other tax projects before. And back to the triangle, this is where we got the mandate from the Ministry of Finance and the Bavarian Tax Ministry, which is behalf of other ministries working on the tax income tax application. So the task was to specifically make the tax declaration easier for the majority of the tax cases, to start with that, because there are over 2,300 inputs in 27 forms. And so our task was to first actually identify the most common use cases. And then we learned we only mostly need 6 forms, and those are still hundreds of forms, hundreds of fields. So we did an intensive data analysis to actually look at the data to figure out which fields are actually used, and came up with 6 forms. But still the question was, are all those fields really necessary? And there again, we talked to the public servants in the tax offices, because they could tell us which data they actually need. So we learned that there are some fields that are just informative but not actually needed for the decisions for the tax offices. And the example is for the commute. So in Germany, you can input your expenses for your work commute, and then later get it refunded. And there are actually 2 things that are just necessary to calculate, and that is the length of the commute and the days, like how often you're actually commuting to work. And but in the tax declaration, there are actually 10 fields, because they are asking how many days per week do you work, how many public holidays did you have, how many vacation days, how many days did you travel, etc. So, but the necessary inputs were just 2 fields. So we showed this reduced form to the users, and to our surprise, they didn't like it. So that's also why it's important to talk to include all, to get the requirements from all sides, and to connect the dots, as I like to say. So with all of that, we presented a new version to the form owners, to build an easier version of the tax declaration. So we added explanations and removed some fields. And the point being is, if those considerations were part of the process from the beginning, we wouldn't even need to do this, or need to do all this work. In the process, we figured out that this work of defining which questions are in the digital tool we were asked to simplify are actually made here in the Federal State Conference. And this is again where the triangle can show you which stakeholders actually play what kind of role, because as I showed earlier, the mandate came from here. So the triangle really can help us to visualize all the different parties who are involved. And I think this is, you could say it's just a stakeholder map, but it's a more concrete version of showing who is really attributing certain requirements. Yeah, now I want to come to a side effect of this, because as I said, the legal aid process has taken 2.5 years almost, and all this was learning during this was learned from this process. And the triangle makes us faster, because for the legal aid application, we started with the form users. It took us a long time to talk to form processors. We also had some false assumptions. We talked only to courts in Berlin because we are based in Berlin, and only later on realized that all courts are different. So this gave us also important insights. And only then, but for political reasons, were later on able to talk to the form owners. And for new forms in our project, we now work with the triangle from beginning. So we start talking with the form users, processes, and form owners from the beginning. And yeah, sometimes all the parties sit in the same room once a week. But yeah, this is really why the triangle makes us faster at the same time. Yeah, so I'm already at the key takeaways. Find the stakeholders wherever they are, and this is often, as I've shown in the tax example, not as clear as it often seems, but even more crucial. And yeah, understand the requirements from all the sides, the why those form fields exist in the first place, which form fields are necessary or missing, and also which form fields are hard to understand. And then connect those dots and evaluate where to have the biggest impact, if it's really changing the regulation or if the usability at the end is the solution. This is also, of course, possible. Or if, yeah, changing processes and training people is actually what is required. So, yeah, to sum it up on one screen, it's finding the stakeholders, understand their requirements, and evaluate where to have the biggest impact. Thank you for listening. And now it's time for questions. And I'm curious to hear, I don't know, I can maybe have a quick look if someone of you posted something in yellow.